Welcome to the AKW podcast, a place where we'll ditch the wellness lies you've been sold and learn what your mom never taught you. If you've ever wondered if the wellness industry is just a billion-dollar scam built on patriarchy and diet culture, it is. Women have been chasing impossible standards for far too long, and I'm here to help you step off the hamster wheel once and for all. No more quick fixes, no more powders or potions or empty promises. Just real talk, real science, real people, and real strategies to help you feel at home in your body and redefine what wellness is on your own terms. Let's get into it.
Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the AKW podcast. I am Andrea Nichols. I am an energy and empowerment coach, and I am super excited you're here today because today we are doing our third episode in my little three-part series on boundaries. We all know that we need to set boundaries, but boundaries can be hard to set, hard to hold, and can really bring up a lot of feelings to the surface, right? So if you haven't listened to the first two episodes in this three-part series, you can go ahead and listen to today's episode. You don't have to listen to them in any kind of order, but I want you to go back and listen to episode 1 and 2, because in episode 1, we talked about how a boundary feels, okay? Why they can be hard to hold and what it means to truly stop performing. Because setting the boundary is the easy part, but holding the energy and not performing the energy can be very hard. So we talk all about that in episode 1. And episode 2, we're talking about how we can perceive someone else's boundary, especially if it's a boundary that we don't necessarily like, how that can feel like rejection and what action steps we need to take to kind of get out of that cyclical effect. I think that episode is really powerful, not just to see how it affects you, but also when you're setting a boundary, you can kind of be more empathetic and understanding how somebody else might be feeling because you've really dissected how you felt in someone else's boundary. So all boundary things. Today we're talking about how boundaries can sometimes be used to control and how that can come up negatively, right? We put up these brick walls and it's not always for the best. So I want to really talk today about how protecting your peace and avoiding connection is not a boundary. Okay, that is a suit of armor. True boundaries are firm, but also fluid. True boundaries are rooted in regulation, not rooted in fear. So I want to start with a story. And I feel like the story is really I feel like everybody can relate to this. And I don't care what side of the political party you're on. Right now, there's just a lot of energy, right? We've got a very charged political environment right now. Again, I don't care where you fall on that scale. Everything just feels very polarizing. People are vocal. I feel like people are more vocal than I have ever seen in my lifetime. I'm 45, and I feel like we're all getting triggered by different things much more than I remember in the past. So I think this is relatable for everybody because there is so much passion and there is so much noise happening around the political scene right now. And it can be hard when some of your loved ones maybe aren't in alignment with you. Maybe you thought they were. Maybe you knew they always weren't, but now everybody just is feeling more charged because of how vocal everything is. And if I'm being honest, I have pulled back from friends and family that maybe I don't feel 100% in alignment with because I am tired and I am overstimulated and I feel like I need safety. Now, putting up a wall is not the same thing as needing a rest. So that's first and foremost, okay? Putting up a wall, not the same thing as taking a day of rest. But also, true healing is about building capacity. Taking a day of rest could help you build capacity. Putting up a wall, trying to control an outcome, trying to control a situation so that you don't feel triggered or someone else doesn't feel triggered, that does not build capacity. It feels safe in the moment, but it also means you're avoiding connection, discomfort, and vulnerability. We need connection, discomfort, and vulnerability. And you're going to be like, why do I need discomfort? Discomfort a lot of times is a mirror and will help us grow. Now, I am not saying that you need to be mistreated, that if you're in any type of belittling or mistreatment or manipulation or abusive scenario, that you should stand for that. That is absolutely not it. I'm talking about the moments where we just don't feel like we have the capacity to be heard or have the hard conversations, to shake up the room, to say what it is we really want, believe, or need. That's what I'm talking about here, okay? That's what this podcast is about today. It is about truly understanding what nervous system healing looks like and how it is about capacity and how one has to really get into some deep topics to be able to heal those things. Have you ever seen somebody that's just like floating through life and you're like, how do they just float through life? Like nothing ever happens to them? Like nothing bad ever happens or nothing ever triggers them or everybody seems to like them? Let me tell you that that is not the case. That is an example of somebody who has done the work. That is an example of somebody who is not trying to control the outcome of a situation, who has not built up walls, but has expanded their capacity to understand that they are not responsible for everyone else's reactions. And also, they understand that they are not the victim of everyone else's actions. They can only control their own emotions and they can only control what happens in their world. And they've accepted that because they have built the capacity and they have built the nervous system regulation and they have built and honored who they are as a person and they're living in alignment. So I want you to know, this is the thing I want you to know. I want you to take away from this today. You do not have to choose. You do not have to choose they're right or I am right, they're wrong or I am wrong. It is them or me. Two things can be true at the same time, and both people can feel respected and honored at the same time, but also have their voice heard. So how do we get to this place where we feel like we can't have our voice heard? I think it goes back to hyper independence. We have been taught, I say we collectively, as like the female, right? Because I am predominantly coaching, talking, working with women. So we collectively, the women, have been taught hyper independence is strength. Right? We're told, don't be too dramatic, don't be too loud, don't be too much. Take care of yourself, take care of other people's emotions, take care of your siblings, take care of your parents, take care of your children, take care of your spouse. Manage everything and don't need anything from anyone else. And that is praised. We're praised for being easygoing and low maintenance. We're praised for being self-sacrificing. We're praised for being the mom that can do it all, the wife, the spouse that can do it all, the partner that can do it all, that can hold it all together, that overachieves all the time. We are praised for that hyper independence, that go get 'em attitude. Vulnerability was never or rarely modeled to us. And I feel like it is being modeled more and more, but it's still not modeled to us like we need it to be. And it is not modeled as safety or healthy. What is modeled as safe and healthy is hyper independence, of being able to take care of yourself and do everything, provide everything that you need for yourself and other people all at the same time. That's what it means to be a successful woman. And that is a lie. That is not true. Hyper independence and this I can buy myself flowers, like, becomes a shield. And we start calling that boundaries. But really, it is just fear in disguise. It is fear of being seen. It is fear of messing up. It is fear of being vulnerable. It is fear of making waves, of being too loud, of saying something you shouldn't, of admitting to somebody that you disagree or that you're upset and showing them your tears and hearing in the back of your head somebody who once told you, I will give you something to cry about. It is vulnerability disguised as hyper independence. And you can grow up in a very loving, healthy household and still get this influence in you, because our social standards, we live in a very patriarchal centered world. Misogyny lives in our culture day to day, and it can be reinforced in you even when you grew up in a healthy household. So I want you to ask yourself, are you protecting your energy? Are you afraid, or are you afraid to be seen needing anything or saying anything different? It might take you a little bit of work, a little bit of journaling, a little bit of sitting in a quiet room and really thinking on that. But that's the question I want you to get to the bottom of. Are you protecting your energy? Are you afraid to be seen? True boundaries allow for connection. Connection with self, connection with others, just connection. Walls cut you off. So some things to think about when you're thinking about, okay, is this boundary a protective armor? Am I cutting off connection, or am I building connection? If you feel immediate relief when you set a quote boundary, but you also feel resentment at the same time, then your boundary is probably not a boundary. It's probably a defense mechanism or like a protective mechanism, right? Maybe you feel resentment because you still have an unspoken need and they don't recognize that need yet, and you're pissed off about it. Maybe it's that you miss that relationship. Maybe you said, okay, I'm not going to Christmas dinner this year because I can't handle, XYZ, whatever it is that you decided that you're going to put up a wall, set your boundary. You're not going to dinner. But then you're resentful and you miss your family, you miss dinners. Then your boundary might not be a boundary. It might be a protective armor. You might feel resentment because you feel like you've abandoned yourself and your needs. You might feel guilt. All of these things can be signs that your boundary might not be a boundary. If you're secretly hoping that the person that you set the boundary for will break back through the wall, definitely not a boundary. You're trying to control an outcome. You're trying to control the other person's reaction. So let's talk about boundaries versus control and what's the motivation. Are you trying to regulate your own nervous system, or are you trying to manage theirs? Okay, so are you trying to regulate your own nervous system? So you're creating space for you to go in and then build the capacity? Because sometimes, like I said, you do need a rest. Sometimes you do need space to be able to build that capacity. And that's okay. Sometimes you can build that capacity as you're working through the boundary. Or are you trying to manage their reaction? You don't want them to see you upset. Or you don't want them to see you angry. Or you don't want them to be upset or angry. The boundary becomes less about what you need and more about managing a situation. Real sovereignty means not needing to manipulate outcomes. Think about that person floating through life again. They're not trying to manipulate the outcome. They are so aligned with who they are and what they need. They're not trying to control everyone else and their experience. I urge you to set boundaries as a way to honor yourself, but not as a way to punish or shut down or bypass hard feelings. So we can't just We got to be vulnerable. I keep going back to that word, but we have to be vulnerable. Emotional caretaking is not a boundary. So if you're trying to control someone else's emotions, that's not a boundary. If you're trying to control your own emotions, that's not a boundary. If you only feel safe when everyone else feels okay, that's not a boundary. It is not your job to make sure everyone else feels okay. You need to make sure your boundary is clear, very clear of what you will or will not do, no matter what anyone else thinks about your boundary. Boundaries are kind. And that's the shift. That's the mindset shift that I think a lot of us need to make. Boundaries are kind. Boundary is a clear explanation and expectation of how you expect to be treated. It is not about controlling their emotions. It is not about controlling their reactions. It is not about you trying to manipulate a situation. It is about telling them what your expectations are and how you need to be cared for. Let's think about a houseplant for a minute. A houseplant needs water. Some houseplants need more water than other houseplants. Some houseplants need to, I love plants, okay? Some houseplants need to be set by a window on an eastern facing house. Some need to be in the shade, no direct sunlight. Those houseplants are not trying to manipulate me. Those houseplants are not trying to make me feel some kind of way, but they all have very clear expectations of what they need to survive. They do not care how I feel about it. Now, obviously, houseplants aren't living beings like us. It's a very oversimplified example, but you get the point. Their expectation of what they need to survive has absolutely nothing to do with me, but it doesn't change the fact that they still need it. I can choose to have that houseplant or not have that houseplant. I can choose to admire that houseplant in someone else's home. I can choose whatever path I need to choose, but it has nothing to do with the boundary that houseplant has put into place. Boundaries do not make you mean. Boundaries are loving and boundaries are clear. So a boundary needs to be kind and firm, soft and sovereign, loving and unavailable. So if you can calmly and steadily state your boundary, you have no emotional attachment to your boundary and the outcome of your boundary, that is a good sign. If you cannot calmly state your boundary and you can't say it in a steady voice, and if you have an expectation, an emotional expectation attached to that boundary, you probably need to do some work and work on some capacity. Your body language. Notice that body language. Are you tense? Are you gritting your teeth? Do you feel like you need to over-explain? Probably need to do a little bit more work on expansion. You're probably still leaning a little bit into trying to manipulate or control. You have to be so grounded in who you are and what you need and be unapologetic for having needs. You are allowed to have needs. You're allowed to have wants. You're allowed to be a houseplant that needs to live on the eastern side of the house in direct sunlight and still have a friend that is a houseplant that needs to live on the western side of the house. Both can live in the same house and it will be fine. You just need to be clear, compassionate, firm, soft, sovereign, loving, and also unavailable all at the same time. So I have a few somatic practices that I like personally that will help you support holding boundaries without shutting off emotionally, without going into that place of unstable voice and tensed body. So how do we create nervous system regulation while upholding a boundary? Grounding with your feet into the earth, 2 feet touching the earth, where you're orienting yourself for safety. Have you ever heard somebody say that lady needs to go outside and touch grass? They need to ground into the earth. Mother Earth will give us a lot of grounding sensation. If you can go outside, fantastic. You're going to get some extra grounding sensation. But even if you can't, 2 feet flat on the earth is going to help your body know that it is safe, that you are on solid ground. That is a figurative phrase that we use a lot, but there's also a very physical, tangible reality to that. 2 feet on the ground will orient your nervous system for safety and will help you be able to calmly embody your boundary. Another one that I really like is breath work for vagal nerve. If you go onto my website, you will find a resource that is called the 5-minute reset, and it walks you through my favorite breath pattern that will help stimulate the vagal nerve, which calms your fight or flight. And that is very powerful. Breath work can be a very powerful tool. And you can do that breath work whenever and wherever. And I suggest practicing it when you don't feel triggered, so it becomes very ingrained in your body. So then when you do feel triggered, it is very easy to access. It is hard to call upon a tool that is not in your body. It is hard to call upon a tool that does not feel familiar to you when you're under a point of stress or when you're under a point of not feeling calm. So you need to practice it during the calm, so then it is easily accessible during those points where you really need it. The deeper you're rooted in your own energy, the more capacity you have the more capacity you have for connection with others, even those that don't 100% align with you, without losing yourself, because you need both. You can't self-sacrifice to meet other people's needs, but you can't just disconnect to meet your own needs. Both realities have to be true. So we got to learn to release the fear of being too much. Remind yourself that boundaries don't make you mean. You're a houseplant and you have needs. This fear, like I said, is deeply rooted into us oftentimes as women. It's internalized misogyny. It is that good girl conditioning. We have learned it from social settings. We have learned it from just our patriarchal culture, but it's not true. So I need you to ask yourself, pause and ask yourself, is this boundary rooted in fear or in self-respect? Am I avoiding something or am I affirming yourself? Only you know the answers to that. And there is no right or wrong. There is no pass or fail here. And it is also okay if you have put up a wall as armor and you know that and you're not ready to take it down yet. But that should be a sign to you that you need to work on your capacity, that you need to work on nervous system regulation and working on building capacity for being able to hold more types of energy at one time. Because shutting down is not going to get you to the place that you want to be. Creating walls, building boundaries, cutting off connection is not going to get you to the place that you want to be. You can protect yourself and still grow until the point that you don't need to protect yourself anymore. You don't have to choose between being open and being safe. There is a way to do both, to be open, to be vulnerable, and still be safe. There's a way to honor your truth without hardening. A way to stay rooted to who you are without becoming rigid. And it's not easy, but this is the work. This is where the work happens. So first you have to understand how you've been conditioned to shut down yourself, and then often throw up a wall. And once you understand that conditioning, then you can start doing the deeper work around building capacity, leaning into vulnerability, vocalizing your own needs. And if this is something you struggle with, if you're like, that all sounds great, Andrea, that sounds fantastic, but how do I do that? Then to absolutely go to the website. I have a lot of resources for you. I have programs, master classes. There's 2 master classes recently that I did, the cortisol chaos master class and the perfectly imbalanced master class. Both of those would be fantastic, a fantastic place to start. Go get that breathing resource. Also, fantastic place to start. If you want to dig in more and you're ready to make a deeper commitment, then you might like the Good Girls Quitters Club. That's our 8-week mini mind where we really dig into part of this. And that's a really cool space because you're walking alongside and you're doing life with people who are walking the same process of opening up into vulnerability and learning to use their voice. And it's messy. And it is so nice to have a community go along with that and understand that it is messy and be in the process with you. You might enjoy that, or you might just be like, I'd rather do it more one-on-one, and that's okay too. I also have one-on-one coaching. So there's a lot of different ways that you can help, or I can help you get into this vulnerability and get into this place where you don't feel like you're shutting down because you're trying to control the outcomes, but you're leaning into who you are. I would love to help you walk that journey. If you have any questions at all, oh my gosh, my word just completely went out of my brain. Never hesitate to reach out to me. I don't care if it's email, on Instagram, through a DM, whatever. Reach out to me and I'll help you point you in the right direction of what resource I think is going to be best for you in the season of life you're in, because absolutely the season of life matters. Not all seasons are the same, and that is okay. And you just pick up where you are in the season that you're in with the capacity that you're able to show up for yourself. And we'll just keep growing from there. I want to thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world to me, and it would help me grow and reach other women who need to hear the same voice and the same podcast. If you would like or comment or share this podcast with someone that might need to hear it, or just comment below and tell me what you enjoyed. And that will help push this podcast out to other listeners. And that's just the way we keep growing. And I appreciate you for being here. I appreciate you for listening. And I will see you on the next episode of the AKW podcast.